Hello and welcome everyone to a special series of Strong at Home. I'm Dr. Brenda Murphy and I'm an educational psychologist with Sail Away Learning and Academy. Today, and for several sessions, I'm going to share with you a story that's very hard for me to tell because it is my story, a story of how thankfully, gratefully, my husband and I survived COVID-19 when the odds were definitely not in our favor. People say, well, do you know where you got COVID from? And like most everyone, I can say, yes, I do know where I got it. And I'm going to share just the picture of the event. There I am in the middle, smiling and excited on the Monday before I started having symptoms at the second of two graduations for Sail Away Academy. We had reworked our schedule to make sure that people were safe from COVID. Our first was an outdoor ceremony on June the 20th. And then on June the 29th, at which this picture was taken, we were in a very large facility. In fact, one that seats over 1,000 people, and people were seated 6 feet apart, social distancing. Many of us wore, and I wore at some point during that day, a mask, and most of the students did, although when they came to take their pictures, they decided that it was okay for a few minutes not to take them. And so it was at that ceremony, because I was very close to the person who had it, who was our speaker. Obviously, I would be. And at that point, we live in a small rural county in Tennessee. And at that point in June, I believe our total COVID count was about 9 or 10. At least that was what I remembered. And so we felt pretty secure and safe in this large facility of keeping far apart. So anyway, we had a wonderful time that day, and we had a wonderful time the rest of that week. My first inkling that something may not be quite right was on Thursday. The graduation was Monday afternoon, and Thursday late afternoon, early evening, I went to the grocery store to prepare for a small gathering of family that we're having the next day, and kind of a catch in my throat. And I said, summer cold, because those things were going on, or allergy, because allergies are very prevalent this time of year. And so I just continued on, felt well that the rest of that evening, and woke up the next morning and felt pretty well. During the latter part of the day, I started not feeling so well, but we were outside for the whole family gathering. I thought, well, it's just allergies and lots of excitement. And so I just kind of put it aside, summer cold, something like that. And then as the day progressed and the family began leaving late in the afternoon, early evening, I started really not feeling well at all and started having kind of chills and fever. And that's really unusual for me. So I said, well, better take my temperature. And so I took my temperature, and oh my goodness, it was 100.4. This was very odd for me. I haven't had a fever for years and years and years, and really didn't think much about it. I thought, well, summer cold, and I called for prayer from close friends and pastors, and said, okay. So that was on July the 3rd. And then on July the 4th, woke up, and my husband didn't feel real well either. And we said, well, summer cold, we'll just take a lot of Tylenol and ibuprofen and move on with our day and celebrate the 4th, which is what we did. Didn't feel real well, but not really that bad. The same thing on July the 5th and the 6th and the 7th. And even on July the 7th, I was concerned that might be this dreaded COVID virus. And so I chose not to go to the office and be around other people, just in caution. So I had planned taping a couple of Strong at Homes about homeschool co-ops, which is an awesome activity and something that I hope people will listen to. Patty Leach, who is the leader of a fabulous homeschool co-op nearby was our guest, and we had great conversations about co-ops and homeschooling, and I hope you'll pull that up and listen to our sessions together if you didn't, because very inspiring. And so I just kind of moved on with that and said, well, I'll take care of myself. I'll take some Tylenol, get some rest. And on that day, later in the day, I got a message from the parent of one of the girls who had graduated. And she sent me a post from our speaker that said, I have COVID. And that really struck something in us. And I told friends, people who might come to our home that day, don't come because we've been exposed to COVID. I called my husband's doctor and said that we had been exposed, and they arranged for him especially to get a test. And so on Thursday, I took him to the VA clinic and he was swabbed. And that same day, I went to my local health department and got swabbed. And we came home, and again, just feeling like we had a summer cold, but maybe a little bit worse, but nothing that we couldn't handle. So we just continued on. And that Saturday, we got a call from my husband's doctor saying, actually, they didn't want to talk to me. My husband doesn't like to talk on the phone. And so I generally take all the phone calls. And so they had to talk to him, and they talked to him, and he had this very serious and sober look on his face. And he said, I've tested positive. So I knew that I would too. However, because of the mounting numbers of testings in our county at that point, I would not get my test results back for almost 10 to 14 days. It was a long wait, although I acted and I knew that I must have COVID. And so during those days, during those several days, that was a week when we discovered that my husband was positive. It had been a week, and we had been self-quarantining, obviously, and isolating, so we had not seen anyone else. Ironically, and this is kind of an important point, ironically, my brother lives with us, and through this whole time, he has remained negative and has not gotten COVID, which why, I have no idea, but that's just one of the anomalies about this disease, about this illness. Some people get it. Some people have very mild cases or no symptoms at all. And others of us, like my husband and I, we ended up with a much more serious case of COVID. As I'm taping this, I'd like to say that when I'm taping this is 2 months after we first developed symptoms of COVID. So it has taken us a much longer time to recover. So as part of my story, at this point, there would be days that I would feel pretty much on top of things, or at least for a few minutes or a few hours. And then at other times, I would feel as if it were not me at all. I would feel as if there were a stranger in my body. There was something else occupying me and controlling me that I had no control over. It didn't seem like how much rest I got, how much Tylenol or ibuprofen I took. I would not feel quite right. And the other thing that bothered me is, although I kept going, just one of those people, I don't know when to stop no matter what. I kept going, and I would take care of some activities, did a lot of activities on Zoom calls, participated in a very important training workshop for Sail Away that we were participants in a very select group through the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center, and I participated in those calls. At least I was there in body, and I was talking, but it wasn't really me. there was as if there was a presence over my mind. And although I was thinking it was the thoughts would come and then immediately vanish, I was really frustrated because I couldn't do the things that I normally do. I couldn't write. I couldn't research. In fact, when I went back to remember what had happened, I'm a journaler. I have journaled since I was a little girl. I journal almost daily. That after July 4th, I did not journal for several weeks. So I have no real recollection. So at that point, at about toward the third week, as I started feeling a little bit better again, I started journaling and went back and tried to reconstruct what that time was like, because it was a very, very dark and difficult time. It was times my husband and I would pray together, very passionate and fervent prayers, declaring that we were children of God, that we knew that we were saved by our Lord Jesus Christ, and that we knew that there was power in his name to heal us and deliver us of this. And that's what we held on to. During the night seasons, when I would wake up not feeling well, I would turn on my phone and play Psalms and Proverbs and scriptures and what is healing prayers. I found one psalm that many of us during this time have clung to. It's Psalm 91. And I would pray that. And I discovered a wonderful version of that by a young woman named Victory Boyd. If you happen to find that, I'll try to remember to post that on the website when we post this series. It's a very soulful rendition of this prayer that proclaims the power and the might and the goodness of God, and that we can rest in his arms and in his refuge. And during these dark days, that's what I clung to. They were dark, and I felt as if it wasn't really me. However, about 10 days after this started, all of a sudden, on an afternoon, I felt like I had my mind back. And I had an assignment through the program that we were working with through the Knox Chamber to do some research as part of that program. And I hadn't been able to do anything like that since this had begun. And so I started on that, and I thought, I'm back. I feel wonderful. We are back. And I went and told my husband, I think we have found the end of this. I think we're on the way. We've reached the zenith of not feeling well, and we're going to be on the downside. Yeah, we had lost our sense of smell and our sense of taste, but I was feeling better. I felt like that my brain was back. And that night, something very different happened. Something very different and unexpected. And I will share that with you on our next session when I talk more about my experience of surviving COVID. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his countenance shine upon you and give you peace. May you rest in him.